The morning the past came back to my doorstep began like any other quiet, orderly, and deceptively calm. I had spent the early hours watering the garden, letting the Charleston sun warm my shoulders as the scent of coffee drifted from the kitchen. After 15 years of silence from my daughter, I had learned to fill my days with purpose instead of expectation. But that morning, something in the stillness felt different, a subtle tension in the air like a held breath before a storm. When the doorbell rang, sharp and sudden, it startled me so deeply I nearly dropped my cup. My hand hesitated on the brass doorknob. No one had come to my home unannounced in years. The echo of that chime seemed to carry the weight of all the unanswered birthdays, the empty chairs at family dinners, and the long stretches of quiet that had replaced love with distance. I opened the door to an empty street. The sunlight glimmered on the hedges, the air calm, the world indifferent. Yet I couldn't shake the unease curling at the edges of my calm. 15 years of absence had taught me resilience, but it had also taught me how silence can build walls taller than forgiveness. I shut the door gently and leaned against it, feeling the faint throb of my pulse in my chest. Something was shifting, unseen but inevitable. As I sipped my coffee, the bitterness grounding me, my mind drifted to the days when my daughter Maris was still a child. She had been a bright, curious girl, a spark of joy I once believed would light my life. I remembered her laughter echoing through the house, her father's steady hand guiding her as she built towers of wooden blocks, the scent of Sunday dinners filling the air. But even then, there had been a subtle undercurrent, an exclusion so soft it was almost invisible at first. Family conversations that flowed around me like a stream around a stone. Decisions made without my voice. Compliments directed elsewhere. When Daniel entered her life, I'd thought his quiet charm and gentle demeanor would bring us closer together. Instead, I became background noise, polite, present, but peripheral. They created a world together, and though I was invited into its periphery, I was never truly part of it. Each family event became a reminder of my growing irrelevance. I was the one who arrived early to help set the table, but was forgotten when it came time for photographs. The one who sent gifts that went unacknowledged, whose name never made it into the stories they told their friends. When Maris married Daniel, I watched with pride and quiet sorrow as she stepped into a new life that seemed to have no space for me. My calls went unanswered more often. Holidays passed with polite excuses. And when her children were born, my visits became obligations, short, awkward, and tinged with the kind of politeness reserved for distant acquaintances. One year, I stopped asking altogether. By my 40s, I had accepted that waiting for recognition from those who refused to see me was a futile act. Instead, I redirected my energy. I bought an old townhouse in a forgotten corner of Charleston. Paint-peeling floors, warped windows clouded with dust. To others, it was a ruin. To me, it was a chance to build something that was truly mine. I spent weeks sanding the floors, scraping the walls, repainting each surface until light once again poured through the windows. It became more than a home, it became my declaration of survival. When I wasn't restoring the house, I worked. I studied property management, took evening classes, and learned to navigate the markets. Slowly, what began as one small home turned into a string of restored properties. I wasn't rich, but I was steady. Each project was a quiet rebellion against the years of being unseen. Every freshly painted wall, every tenant who smiled at their new home reminded me that I was capable of building meaning without needing approval from anyone. And though my success grew, my heart remained guarded. I heard of Maris's milestones, secondhand Daniel's promotions, the children's recitals, vacations, and anniversaries I was never invited to. Still, I refused bitterness. I had learned that resentment was simply another way of waiting for someone else's validation. Instead, I found purpose in giving. I sponsored local scholarships, helped maintain community gardens, and mentored young women who reminded me of the girl I once was, eager, capable, and overlooked. Years passed. My reputation in Charleston grew quietly like ivy climbing the walls of old homes. People began to recognize me not as someone's forgotten mother, but as Elowen Harper, the woman who rebuilt neglected spaces and turned them into homes for families who needed second chances. The loneliness that had once defined me became solitude, and in that solitude, I found strength. Then one afternoon, the phone rang. The sound was so unexpected that for a moment, I simply stared at it. When I answered, the voice on the other end was shaky but familiar. "Mom, it's me." "Mary's." Her voice was thinner than I remembered, weighted by exhaustion and hesitation. She told me she was struggling, that her marriage was crumbling, that Daniel was distant, and that the children were confused. She spoke carefully as though every word might shatter something fragile. I listened silent but steady, my heart torn between compassion and self-preservation. For years I had imagined this moment, her reaching out, needing me, but I hadn't expected it to come wrapped in desperation. When she paused, waiting for my response, I took a deep breath. "Maurice," I said softly, "you've always been stronger than you think, but strength doesn't mean ignoring what's broken." It was all I could offer, wisdom without surrender. As we hung up, I stared out the window at the Charleston skyline, the setting sun gilding the rooftops in gold. The years had carved both distance and wisdom into me. I knew then that life was bringing us back to a reckoning, one I would meet with calm, not fear. 15 years of silence were about to end, and when they did, I would make sure that I faced the past not as the forgotten mother they had once dismissed, but as the woman I had become. The doorbell rang again one humid Charleston afternoon, its sharp chime slicing through the quiet like a memory I hadn't yet forgiven. I set down my pen, my heart catching a rhythm it hadn't known in years. Through the frosted glass, I saw the blurred outlines of 3 figures. A woman's shoulders slightly stooped under the weight of exhaustion, a man standing stiffly beside her, and 2 smaller shapes shifting nervously at their sides. My throat tightened before my mind caught up with what my eyes already knew. Maris, Daniel, and their children. For a moment, I couldn't move. 15 years of distance condensed into a single heartbeat. The room felt too still, too fragile. I wiped my palms on my skirt and opened the door slowly, letting the hot air rush in. Time had not been kind to her. Maris looked older, her face drawn, her confidence dimmed. Daniel stood behind her. Expression strained, trying to project calm, but failing. And the children, my grandchildren, watched me with wide, uncertain eyes, curious but cautious. "Mom," Maris said softly, her voice barely steady, "we need to talk." I nodded once and stepped aside, gesturing them in. No embraces, no polite warmth, just a silent invitation to the reckoning that had been waiting for us both. They entered the foyer hesitantly, the space filled with sunlight that pooled over the polished floors, and glinted, off-framed photographs lining the walls. Pictures not of family, but of restoration projects, community events, young faces I'd mentored through the years. Proof that while they had erased me, I had kept living. I moved to the kitchen out of habit, pouring coffee into white porcelain cups as they took their seats in the living room. The familiar ritual steadied my hands, though my pulse still thrummed like a trapped bird. When I returned, the air was thick with unspoken words. Daniel studied the floor. The children sat upright, their small hands folded tightly in their laps. Maris looked at me then, away as though afraid that direct eye contact might expose the truth neither of us was ready to admit. "It's nice to see you," she began, her smile trembling. "It's been a long time." I placed the coffee tray on the table with deliberate precision, the sound of porcelain against wood filling the silence. 15 years, I replied evenly. A very long time. She flinched. I saw the flicker of guilt cross her face, and for a fleeting second I almost softened. But then I remembered the years of holidays spent alone, the unanswered letters, the empty space at my table, every Thanksgiving, the ache that had long ago turned into something steadier, acceptance. Daniel cleared his throat, his voice polite but shallow. We thought it might be time to reconnect. The kids wanted to meet their grandmother. His words landed flat, rehearsed, the kind of sentiment spoken for appearance rather than sincerity. I turned to the children, offering a gentle smile that was real, even if the moment wasn't. "I'm glad you're here," I said softly. "I've thought of you often." Their eyes brightened, slightly innocent and unburdened. But as my gaze shifted back to Maris and Daniel, the distance between us reasserted itself like an invisible wall. I studied them quietly, letting the silence grow uncomfortable. It was a power I had learned over time, the strength of stillness, the weight of words unsaid. Finally, Maris broke. "Mom, I know things haven't been right between us. I made choices I thought were best at the time. I didn't realize how much I was—" She faltered, searching for a word that wouldn't sound like an excuse. "How much I was pushing you away." I leaned back in my chair, my hands folded neatly in my lap. "You didn't just push me away," I said calmly. "You erased me." The sentence lingered in the air, heavy but not cruel. Her eyes widened, glistening slightly, and for a moment I saw the child she once was, the girl who used to reach for my hand during storms. But I couldn't forget how easily she had let go when adulthood came. Daniel spoke next, trying to fill the silence. "We've been through a difficult time. The divorce, the move. Maris thought maybe—" I raised a hand, gently stopping him. "You thought maybe what that 15 years could be undone with a visit." His jaw tightened, and the children's eyes darted nervously between us. I sighed softly, not out of anger, but weariness. "You don't have to explain. Life has a way of teaching lessons. Time refuses to rush. I understand more than you think." For a few minutes, none of us spoke. The only sound was the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner, its rhythm steady and indifferent to human discomfort. I let my gaze wander around the room, the house that had once been a refuge from loneliness and had since become a sanctuary of purpose. Every corner reflected my life's quiet victories, not the family I had lost, but the life I had built without them. "I didn't call you here to reopen old wounds," Maris said finally, her voice trembling. "I just wanted you to know we're trying. I'm trying." "I see that," I said softly, "and I hope you succeed." I paused, letting the next words come with care. "But understand this, my life didn't stop when you left. I built something steady, something that doesn't disappear when people do. If you want a place in it, it must be earned, not assumed." She nodded slowly, eyes glistening again. Daniel stared at the floor, his silence a quiet admission of complicity. As the children began fidgeting, I offered them cookies from a tin on the table. Their laughter broke the tension for a moment, light and unburdened. And in that sound, I felt a faint stirring of peace. Not reconciliation, but recognition. The past could not be rewritten, but perhaps it could be understood. I leaned back in my chair, watching the afternoon sunlight drift across the floor, and for the first time in 15 years, I felt the old ache begin to ease. Whatever came next, I would face it on my terms, with grace, with strength, and with the quiet dignity that had carried me through every storm. As the afternoon sun filtered through the lace curtains, the room filled with the kind of silence that carried the weight of everything unsaid. Maris sat stiffly on the edge of the couch, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles blanched. Daniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees, avoiding my gaze entirely. The children had retreated into polite whispers, the innocence of their chatter weaving through the tension like faint music. I watched them all, the family that had once been mine, and yet had never truly felt like it, and felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. the kind that comes when you realize there is nothing left to prove. I took a slow sip of coffee before speaking again. You know, I said quietly, when you shut someone out long enough, eventually they stop waiting by the door. Maris flinched and I saw her swallow hard. Mom, she said softly, I never meant for it to be this way. Life just got busy. I almost smiled, though not out of amusement. Life always does, I murmured. But busyness doesn't erase memory or absence. For a moment, her eyes darted toward Daniel as if seeking reassurance. But he only pressed his lips together, the silence between them betraying more truth than either could voice. I leaned back, letting the quiet do its work. I had spent too many years being talked over. Now silence was mine to command. I remember the last time we spoke, I said, my voice steady. You told me you didn't want drama at your home anymore, that my opinions were too much. Do you remember that? Her eyes filled the tears, trembling but not yet falling. I do, she whispered. I believed you, I said. So I stopped showing up. I stopped calling. I thought that's what you wanted. I looked around the room at the family photographs they hadn't seen, the children from my scholarship programs, the smiling faces of neighbors at the community center, the ribbon-cutting ceremonies for the homes I'd rebuilt. In the time you forgot me, I found people who didn't. Daniel finally spoke, his voice low and tight. We didn't mean to hurt you, Elowen. We thought you were better off on your own. I studied him for a long moment, then smiled faintly. You're right about one thing, I said. I am better off. But not because I wanted to be. Because I learned to be. The clock ticked in the background, and for a moment none of us moved. Then one of the children, a girl with soft curls and bright, curious eyes, looked up at me and asked, Grandma, did you build all these houses? Her voice was pure, unguarded. It sliced cleanly through the tension. I turned to her and nodded. Yes, sweetheart, I did. Every one of them started out broken, but I fixed them piece by piece. She smiled, eyes wide with wonder. That's amazing. And just like that, the air shifted. A faint warmth returned, not reconciliation, but something gentler, a flicker of possibility. I caught Maris watching me, her expression caught between pride and regret. I knew that look well. It was the face of someone realizing too late what they'd taken for granted. I set my cup down and folded my hands in my lap. I didn't bring you here to make you feel guilty, I said softly. But I won't pretend things can be the same. 15 years is a long time. I've changed, and so have you. Maris nodded slowly, wiping at her eyes. I don't know how to make it right. By not pretending, I replied simply, start there. She exhaled shakily, and for a moment the proud, guarded woman who had walked through my door seemed to vanish, replaced by the daughter I once knew. The one who used to follow me through the garden, asking how flowers grew back after winter. I saw her glance around the house again, her gaze resting on the polished woodwork, the photos of community events, the framed certificate from the mayor's office, thanking me for revitalizing the historic district. You've built something incredible, she said softly. I didn't realize. No, I interrupted gently. You didn't want to realize, but that's all right. You're seeing it now. Daniel straightened, clearing his throat, trying to reclaim some semblance of control. We should probably go soon, he said awkwardly. Maris shot him a sharp look, then turned back to me. Could we maybe come by again? The kids would like that. I hesitated for a moment. The instinct to protect my peace warred with the faint tug of hope that still lingered somewhere deep inside me. I had no illusions about quick forgiveness. Time doesn't work that way. But bridges, if built slowly and with care, could hold more weight than people realized. Maybe I said finally, if it's not just for show. Maris nodded, understanding the condition unspoken. The children smiled uncertainly, and I reached out to brush a strand of hair from my granddaughter's face. Remember this, I said softly to her. Things that break can be mended, but only if you take care not to break them the same way twice. Her eyes lit with something like understanding, and I felt a flicker of warmth that surprised me. As they gathered their things, Maris paused in the doorway. "Mom," she said quietly, "thank you for letting us in." I nodded, not with sentiment, but with quiet acknowledgement. "Just remember, you're the one who knocked." When the door finally closed behind them, the silence returned. But this time, it didn't feel empty. It felt earned. I walked through the house, running my hand along the smooth banister, the wood warm beneath my palm. I thought of the years I had spent rebuilding my life from nothing, of the strength it had taken to turn loss into foundation, isolation into independence. Outside, the sky had begun to turn gold. The city hummed beyond the garden, alive and steady. I looked out through the window and smiled to myself, a small, knowing smile that carried no bitterness, only truth. 15 years had taken much from me, but they had also given me the one thing I'd never had before: peace that didn't depend on anyone else. The evening after their visit, I sat alone by the window with a cup of tea growing cold in my hands. The Charleston dusk was painting the world in muted gold, and the city hummed in the distance, a comforting sound, steady and alive. Yet the quiet inside my home felt heavier than usual, as if the echoes of my daughter's voice still lingered between the walls. I traced the rim of the cup absently, thinking of the way Maris had looked at me before leaving her eyes flickering with something between remorse and realization. For years, I had told myself I didn't need that recognition, but part of me, the quiet part I rarely listened to, had always longed for it. As night settled, I walked through the house, turning off the lights one by one. My reflection caught in the hallway mirror a woman older, sharper, but not hardened. Every line on my face told the story of battles fought silently, not against enemies, but against invisibility. I had survived being forgotten. I had rebuilt my life from silence. But seeing Maris again had stirred something I hadn't felt in years, the ache of family. Not the obligation of it, not the pain, but the longing for connection untainted by expectation. The next morning, I woke before dawn. Habit, not necessity. The air was still cool, the garden damp with dew. I brewed my coffee and stepped onto the porch, listening to the faint rustle of the city waking up. I thought about Maris's children, their wide eyes, their innocent questions. They hadn't inherited their mother's distance yet, and for a moment I allowed myself to wonder if this was life's way of offering a small do-over, a second chance to love without waiting to be seen first. A week passed before I heard from Maris again. This time it was a text message, tentative, almost shy. "Mom, the kids can't stop talking about you. Would you like to join us for lunch next Sunday?" I stared at the screen for a long time. A younger version of myself would have responded, immediately desperate to accept even the smallest olive branch. But the woman I had become, the woman shaped by solitude and strength, knew better. I didn't need to rush toward what had taken 15 years to return. So I waited, let the message sit, and finished my coffee before replying simply, "Let's see how the week goes." It wasn't bitterness that made me cautious. It was wisdom. Love, when unguarded, had cost me too much in the past. Now I approached it the way I approached every house I restored, slowly, deliberately, making sure the foundation was solid before rebuilding the walls. In the days that followed, I found my rhythm again, meetings with city planners, mentoring sessions at the community center, an evening lecture on sustainable architecture, where I spoke about building beyond what's broken. My voice didn't shake, and afterward, a young woman approached me with tears in her eyes. "You made me believe it's not too late to start again," she said. I smiled and told her it never is. That night, walking home under the soft glow of streetlights, I thought about how true those words were, not just for her, but for me, too. Maybe after all these years, it wasn't too late for something new with Maris. Not the version of family I'd once dreamed of, but something honest, stripped of expectation. Sunday came with a soft drizzle, the kind Charleston was famous for, warm, brief, and oddly comforting. I found myself driving toward the cafe Maurice had mentioned, my heart, calm but aware. When I arrived, she was already there, waving through the window with an uncertain smile. The children ran up to hug me, and I let them, their small arms grounding me in the present. Daniel wasn't there. For that, I was quietly grateful. Lunch unfolded gently, awkwardly at first, but not painfully. Maris asked about my projects. The children showed me their drawings. There were pauses, yes, but no sharp edges in them, just space, as if both of us were learning to breathe the same air again. When the waiter brought dessert, Maris hesitated before speaking. "I didn't realize how much you'd done, Mom. Everyone in the neighborhood talks about your houses, your programs. I guess I thought you were just keeping busy. I didn't know you were changing lives." I looked at her and smiled faintly. "I wasn't keeping busy," I said. "I was living." Her eyes dropped to her plate, shame flickering across her features. "I should have been there," she whispered. I took a slow breath. "You weren't ready," I said softly. "And that's all right. We can't change the past, Maris. We can only decide how much of it we bring into the present." She looked up at me, tears catching in her lashes. "Can we start again?" It wasn't a question I had ever expected to hear. And though my heart wanted to say yes instantly, I had learned that love must be measured in actions, not apologies. So I reached across the table, covered her hand with mine, and said, "We can start by being honest." Her smile trembled, but it was real. "That's fair," she said. By the time we left the cafe, the drizzle had stopped, leaving the streets slick and shining. The children walked ahead, laughing, their hands swinging freely. I watched them, my heart lighter than it had been in years. As we said our goodbyes, Maris hugged me. It wasn't long or dramatic. It was quiet, cautious, sincere. I held her for a moment, then let go. She stepped back and said, "I'll call you this week." "Do that," I replied, my voice even but kind. Driving home, I thought about how strange and beautiful it was to rebuild something long broken, not with grand gestures, but with patience and truth. I had learned how to restore houses, but perhaps the harder work was restoring trust. And like every good restoration, it would take time. When I got home, the porch light flickered to life, automatically casting a warm glow across the entryway. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and breathed deeply. The house was quiet again, but no longer lonely. It felt like it was waiting not for someone to fill it, but for the next chapter to begin. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat by the window, and watched as the city lights shimmered against the horizon. In that moment, I realized something simple, yet profound. Forgiveness is not about erasing what hurt you. It's about reclaiming your peace from it. And for the first time in years, peace wasn't something I was holding on to. It was something holding on to me. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to share it. Leave a comment about what forgiveness means to you. And don't forget to follow for more true stories that remind us it's never too late to rebuild what's been broken.